Hi, and welcome to our analysis of the 2017 AP English and Language Composition free response question of the rhetorical analysis. So, this passage was a speech made by Clare Boothe Luce, who was a politician and journalist. So it says this passage below is the opening to a speech made in 1960 by American journalist and politician Clare Boothe Luce to journalists at a women's national press conference. In the speech, Luce went on to criticize the tendency of American press to sacrifice journalistic integrity in favor of the perceived public demand for sensationalist stories. Read the we don't need to know that. Okay. So basically, they're telling us to analyze this, which is what a rhetorical response wants us to do. The commencement of her speech starts with, "I am happy and flattered to be a guest of honor on this always exciting and challenging occasion. But looking over this audience tonight, I am less happy than you might think and more challenged than you could know. I stand here at this rostrum invited to throw rocks at you. You could have asked me to tell you what's wrong with you, the American press. The subject not only is of great national significance, but also has, one would say, infinite possibilities and infinite perils to the rock house thrower." So she starts off by saying happy and flattering, basically as a sarcastic, in a sarcastic tone. She it's kind of like she's trying to make it lighthearted for the things that she's going to say, and then she shifts the her tone by saying, but looking through the audience, she's less happy than they might think. Here in Guest of Honor, she says Guest of Honor to be antagonistic and to show that they basically asked for her opinion in this little press club conference. Then she shifts and she explains, she uses the word you a lot repetitiously. And she says, I stand here at this rostrum invited, saying she was invited, reasons why, like I said. And the subject being the American press. And she's like saying, you have asked me to tell you what's wrong with you, meaning that's the reason why she's going to say the things that she's going to say, so they shouldn't be so offended. So basically in this paragraph, the main idea is that she's basically using repetition to call out that they were the ones that invited her here, and what she's going to take the opportunity to say what she has to in order to get the American press to understand what they're doing, which is what we'll go through later. For the next paragraph, for the banquet speaker who criticizes the weakness and pretensions or exposes the follies and sins of his listeners, even at the invention, does not generally provoke an enthusiastic, no less a friendly response. The delicate art of giving an audience hell is always one best left to the Billy Grahams and the Bishop Sheens. So she's going into this paragraph. She's aware that they could give her, her criticisms could give criticisms to her, if that makes sense. Like, she's aware she's gonna receive backlash for everything that she's saying.
Okay, but you are an audience of journalists. There is no audience anywhere who should be more bored, indeed more revolted, by a speaker who tried to fawn on it, butter it up, exaggerate its virtues, play down its faults, and who would more quickly see through any attempt to do so. I ask you only to remember that I am not a volunteer for this subject tonight. You asked for it. So essentially, Luce's repetition of the word it is to refer to the stories that are being published by the media that have been exaggerated and essentially buttered up in an attempt to sell. As a former journalist herself, her emphasis of this is to support her opposition to these stories that have been reporting false news. Her statement of her audience asking for it is to prevent any outrage of opposition in her audience, even though she is clearly stating the truth. And moving on, for what is good journalism all about? On a working, finite level, it is the effort to achieve illuminating candor in print and to strip away cant. It is the effort to do this not only in matters of state, diplomacy, and politics, but also in every smaller aspect of life that touches the public interest or engages proper public curiosity. It is the effort to explain everything, from a summit conference to why the moon looks larger coming over the horizon than it does when it has fully risen in the heavens. It is the effort, too, to describe the lives of men and women, big and small, close at hand or thousands of miles away, familiar in their behavior or unfamiliar in their idiosyncrasies. It is, to use the big word, the pursuit of and the effort to state the truth. In this next paragraph, she extends her claim that instead of reporting over-the-top false stories that have no meaning, instead, the media should always be able to clearly state the truth, whether, as she states, to a summit conference, to any sort of mundane, boring aspect of life, it should always be truthful, no matter how much it could be exaggerated in order to sell stories. That essentially she wants any stories that are being published in the media to be authentic and true. She states this in a very straightforward manner to prevent any confusion and to explicitly declare her stance and what should be done.
Hello, this is Jemny, and today I'll be analyzing this section of the speech. Okay, so she starts off by saying, "No audience knows better than an audience of journalists that the pursuit of the truth and the articulation of it is the most delicate, hazardous, exacting, and inexact of tasks. Consequently, no audience is more forgiving, I hope, to the speaker who fails or stumbles in his own pursuit of it. The only failure this audience could never excuse in any speaker would be the failure to try to tell the truth, as he sees it, about his subject." So in this section of the speech, Luce is saying, like we noticed, I hope, she put it in parentheses. She wanted to call attention to this specific section. She feels that the audience should be forgiving towards her because the stories they have reflect negatively on her, and she has the right to her own opinion, so they should be more forgiving, which is why she says I hope, and she puts it in parentheses because she's saying like she'd hope that they do that for her since they were the ones that invited her there in the first place.
This is Abby, and I'm going to be doing the concluding paragraph to the essay. She starts with, "In my perilous but earnest effort to do so here tonight, I must begin by saying that if there is as much that is wrong with the American press, there's also that much that is right with it," which is kind of contradicts the most of the speech, because she basically points out all its flaws and what's wrong with it. But here she says that she actually, while there are things that she doesn't like, there's a lot of things that she does like about it, which makes sense because she is a journalist. She then goes on to say, "I know then that you will bear with me, much as it may go against your professional grain, if I ask you to accept some of the good with the bad, even though it may not make such good copy for your newspapers." And this is once again, she's saying that the problem is with the news is that it exaggerates and it repeats, and it's more lies than the truth, which is what the news should be. And it makes her sad because that's what makes more money, and she realizes that. So the purpose of this entire speech, which is what she brings up in the last paragraph, is that she wants there to be sort of a half. Like, half can be exaggerated because it does make more money, but the other half can be the truth, which is what the news should be. And she says also that you will bear with me, because she's kind of acknowledging how she was the guest of honor and she was invited here, and she kind of, I guess, to lessen the blow of what all the things that she said, because it could have come off as rude, and that's ultimately, she doesn't want them to be mad at her audience, of course. And she says, even though, for the plain fact it is that the US daily press today is not inspiringly good. It is just far and away the best press in the world. So once again, she wants the US daily press to be good, but it's not. and it could be good.
Hi, this is Jemny and Abby, and today we'll be talking about the rhetorical square. So the speaker, she's the first woman who was appointed to a major ambassadorial post abroad. Her audience is the American press, and the context of her speech is that the politicians and journalists that were in the room, they had invited her as the guest of honor to make a speech, and she took that as an opportunity to criticize the media for exaggerating and lying in their stories.
Overall, her persona is very blunt, critical, even a bit passive-aggressive, as she can be rude full out, as she is talking to an audience that invited her. And her purpose is to criticize the views of, to criticize the news for their exaggerations. Overall, it starts off where she's thanking the audience, and she goes into criticizing them for the majority of the passage, and she ends off by talking about her compromise to have both fake news and, well, not fake news, but exaggerated news and more truthful news. And this has been our analysis on Clare Boothe Luce's essay.
Welcome, and I am Amari because I messed that up. Do it again. Can you say 3, 2, 1?
Okay. Luce repeats the word "it's" to emphasize the stories that the media. Oh my god. Fuck. She repeats the word "it's" to emphasize the stories that aren't that are.
Starting off, it goes, she says, I am happy and flattered to be, stop it, ambassador.
But like
ambassador.
what I was like trying to say is that like we zoom in to your section, Amari.
That's too much though.
But why?
Like the guy in the
One
video,
time
for
we can
example,
figure out what it
you
is.
just have the whole thing there. You point to what you're talking about. That's it.
Should I read it all and then go into my part?
I think it'd be better if we just read our own
Yeah,
parts.
read our own part. Okay.
Yeah, because it makes more sense.
And it'll make it longer if we read it first and then analyze it.
Yeah, so then what we can do, like, we read it, like,
And
read
a little
a
bit,
sentence
yeah.
and, like, go along.
Read it slowly and very emphasis.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
analyze
That's
it.
fine. Okay, bye.
So you're
Oh shit. I mean, hold on.
Wait, Jemny, I can hold it while you're.
Yeah, you already started recording.
Does it say speaker?
Yeah, that was right now.
Hello? I'm just trying to figure out how I'm gonna go home and fix my part. Like, how?
I mean,
I'm gonna have to be like, yo, editing Amari here. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, whatever, it's fine. Oh my god, wait, I don't even, okay, wait. I've been recording.